Hey guys, tonight we journey into a world you think you know, but trust me, you don't. We're traveling back to a time when survival didn't mean charging your phone before bed. It meant not freezing to death before breakfast. A time when architecture was improvised roofs leaked on purpose, and insulation was a word no one had invented yet. Tonight's story is about how medieval peasants, your everyday turnip-boiling, hay-stuffed mattress, sleeping, goat-complaining ancestors, faced down winter with a mix of mud manure and sheer stubborn willpower. But first, if you're enjoying these nighttime trips into the uncomfortable past, go ahead and like the video, subscribe if you haven't already, and let me know in the comments what time it is where you're watching from. I always love seeing who's awake across the globe with a taste for historical misery. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum in the background. Settle into your blankets. Yes, actual blankets, not a rag soaked in sheep grease. And let's slip together into tonight's story. Tonight's journey. How did peasants in the Middle Ages build homes to endure deadly winters? Forget castles, stone towers, or cozy cottages from storybooks. The average medieval home was less hearth and home and more drafty mud cube with ambition. These weren't designed for comfort. They were desperate attempts to keep out wind snow and the looming specter of winter death. You're not a lord. You're not a noble. You don't even get a fireplace with a chimney. You're a peasant, and winter doesn't care how cold you are. So your house is made of what you can gather. Mud, sticks, dung, maybe a few stones if you live somewhere fancy. The goal isn't luxury, it's survival. Barely. In tonight's video, we're going to walk barefoot through the full experience. You'll wake up in one of these homes, shiver through breakfast, and learn exactly what it meant to build shelter with no blueprints, no insulation, and no sympathy from the weather. We'll explore everything from how walls were smeared with animal dung for warmth to why sleeping with your livestock wasn't weird, it was practical. This isn't just about architecture. It's about adaptation. How generations of peasants figured out that layering straw on frozen dirt floors, stuffing rags into wall gaps, and keeping a smoky fire smoldering all night might just keep them alive, if they were lucky, and if their roof didn't collapse. By the time we're done, you'll never complain about your thermostat again. So get cozy. Because this isn't just a history lesson, it's a slow, immersive descent into a world where staying warm meant sleeping next to a goat, praying the fire didn't die out, and considering dung an excellent construction material. This is how peasants in the Middle Ages built homes to endure deadly winters. You wake up with a jolt. Not because of an alarm clock, those don't exist, but because a draft of icy wind just crept in through a gap in the wall and slapped you across the face. Welcome to your new reality. You're not in your bed, not in your time, and not even sure what century it is. But one thing is painfully clear. It's cold. It's winter. And you are now a peasant in the Middle Ages. You're lying on what barely qualifies as a bed. A thin sack of straw stuffed unevenly with whatever wasn't already moldy. The fabric is coarse, rough against your skin, and smells like someone else's armpit, or more accurately, several generations of armpits. The straw underneath crackles every time you shift, not just with noise, but possibly with fleas. The blanket covering you is a woolen mass, heavy from age and damp from breath livestock fumes or last night's mist. You're not sure. What you are sure of is that it smells like wet dog and despair. It offers no real warmth, only the illusion of it. And in here, illusions are sometimes all you get. The air in the room is thick and unmoving. Not warm, oh no, not by any means, but heavy with smoke from the fire pit across the room that died down sometime after midnight. The smoke hangs just below the ceiling, curling lazily in the rafters, unable to escape. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof where smoke might leave and rain definitely enters. You breathe it in like everyone else does and try not to cough too loudly. You don't want to wake the baby, or the pig, or your cousin, because you're not alone, not even remotely. This isn't your room, it's the room, one room. Your entire family, mother, father, siblings, grandparents, perhaps a widow neighbor, definitely several chickens, sleeps in here stacked like awkward half-frozen logs. Privacy is not a thing. Even personal space is a myth. Someone's foot is in your back. Someone else is snoring into your ear. You can't move without elbowing a relative. And there's a sheep breathing softly near your legs. Why? Because in the medieval world, if it's warm-blooded, it's welcome. Animals sleep inside for warmth, for safety, and sometimes just because the barn roof collapsed again. The family pig is not just livestock, it's a heating device. You're essentially cuddling with bacon that hasn't happened yet. Light begins to seep in, not from a lamp or switch, but from a dirty patched hole in the wall, sometimes called a window. It's not glass. Glass is for churches and kings. This is animal hide stretched thin, or maybe a wooden shutter that barely closes. The light is dull gray, filtered through thick morning mist and the lingering breath of night frost. It illuminates the room just enough for you to realize how damp the floor is, and how wet your toes now feel. The floor, by the way, is not made of wood. That would be a luxury. It's dirt. Packed, uneven, cracked earth. In summer it's dusty. In winter it's mud. Sometimes frozen mud. Sometimes not so frozen mud with something suspicious in it. You curl your feet in under your blanket and pretend it's not there. You can hear noises outside already. The crows loud and obnoxious. The occasional clatter of a cart rolling over frozen ruts. A distant church bell tolls somewhere far off, a harsh metallic clang that lets the village know it's time to get up and pretend this day will be better than the last. It won't be. But it's good to hope. Inside, the rest of the room begins to stir. Someone stretches, cracking joints that sound like breaking sticks. Someone coughs, wet, deep, possibly contagious. Someone else mutters a prayer, their voice hoarse, their breath clouding in the frigid air. You hear the familiar rustle of straw bedding, the shuffling of worn boots, the groan of a wooden bench as your father gets up to relight the fire. His breath hangs in the air like a ghost. You can see it. You can taste it. The hearth at the center of the room is nothing more than a blackened pit surrounded by stone. It has one job: keep you alive. It's struggling. Someone banked the fire last night, buried the coals under ash to preserve heat, but the embers are weak. A few red eyes glow faintly in the dark ashes. Your father pokes at them, curses under his breath, and tosses on a handful of kindling. Smoke explodes upward like an insult. Everyone coughs. The baby starts crying. Someone passes the kindling. You don't speak. There's no need. Everyone knows the routine. You sit up slowly. Your back protests. Your knees click. You're maybe 20, but your joints feel 50. Cold does that. So does sleeping on straw sacks while inhaling soot for half your life. You're wearing the same clothes you wore yesterday, and the day before, and the day before that. There's no such thing as sleepwear. You just sleep in whatever you wore to work because it's warm, and you don't own enough outfits to justify changing. Your tunic is rough wool patched with thread that's seen better centuries. Your hose are sagging. Your feet are wrapped in rags because shoes are for outside, and warmth is for the lucky. You stumble to your feet, step carefully around the pig, and stretch. Bad idea. The cold rushes into your bones like water into a sinking ship. Your muscles seize. Your spine cracks. You glance up and notice something dripping from the thatched roof. Hopefully, it's just melting frost. Hopefully. It's morning now, officially. The room is noisy, smoky, crowded, and still somehow colder than you'd like. The fire starts to catch again. A flicker of orange. A brief wave of warmth. You shuffle closer, hands outstretched. So does everyone else. The day has begun. You haven't eaten. You haven't washed. You haven't stepped outside. And already you're tired. Already you're wondering how many more months of this winter you'll have to survive. Already you're counting the firewood pile in your head. It's not enough. But you're alive. For now. This is your home. Your haven. Your muddy, smoky, overcrowded, underheated, life-saving box of straw and hope. Welcome to the Middle Ages. It's morning now, though the sun hasn't done much to prove it. The light outside is pale and sluggish, barely more than a suggestion. Inside, the fire has caught just barely. The room flickers with dim orange light, casting long shadows across damp walls and revealing every inch of soot-stained imperfection. The air smells of wet wool wood smoke and last night's stew, which may or may not be the same thing as this morning's breakfast. Your stomach growls. You wish it wouldn't. Hunger is a constant quiet companion, always pacing in the corner of your mind. You don't wake up expecting a feast. You wake up hoping there's still something left in the pot from yesterday. If you're lucky, no one scraped it clean in the night. Breakfast isn't a separate meal in your world. It's not something with a start time, a menu, or options. It's whatever's available. And this morning available is pottage. Pottage is the medieval equivalent of food-shaped survival. A thick, sludgy mixture of grains, legumes, root vegetables, and mystery. It simmers for days in the same pot, over the same fire, in the same corner of the room, collecting ingredients like secrets. Sometimes it has onions, sometimes beans, sometimes just hot water and hope. You add what you can when you can. Leftovers go in, so do peels. Occasionally, if someone traded well at the market, or a chicken had an unfortunate accident, there's meat. Today, no meat. Just turnip chunks and some very tired barley. You dip a wooden spoon into the pot. It's thick like wet clay and just as gray. You scoop it into a shallow bowl, more of a carved wooden disc, and sit near the fire. Everyone else is doing the same. No one talks much in the mornings. There's no caffeine, no sugar rush, just steam and silence. You raise the spoon. The pottage is hot, thankfully. It's also bland. Or maybe it's sour. It's hard to tell. Flavor isn't really part of the equation. Nutrition is. Warmth is. You chew slowly, carefully. The grains are unevenly cooked. The turnip is still hard in the center, but it fills your stomach. Or tries to. There's bread, too. A small, flat, round, dense, dry, dark. It's made from rye or barley, sometimes both. Never wheat. Wheat is for people who don't live in homes with pigs. Your bread is chewy and full of little surprises. Bits of grit from the millstone. Tiny rocks. Maybe some weevils. But you don't flinch. You've eaten worse. Sometimes, if the mood strikes you, dip the bread into the pottage to soften it. It helps. A little. Other times, you scrape the bowl with it. Efficiency is survival. Wasting food is not just unwise, it's unthinkable. To drink you have ale, not a rich, frothy pub ale. This is small ale, weak, sour, watery, and barely alcoholic. But it's safer than water. Water can kill you. It hides parasites, filth, disease. Ale is boiled. Ale is safe. Even children drink it. So you take a swig, swish it around your mouth, and swallow with a grimace. Better than dying of dysentery. Now comes the part of the morning you dread more than breakfast washing, or the medieval version of it. There is no sink, no soap, no bathroom mirror to stare into and wonder where it all went wrong. Hygiene in your world is minimalist. If you're lucky, there's a basin with some water in the corner. Cold water. Always cold. Ice cold in winter. You splash some onto your face. Your skin shrinks from the shock. It feels like punishment. And maybe it is. A reminder from nature. You're still alive. Now suffer accordingly. There's no towel. You pat your face dry with your sleeve. It's already damp. It makes no difference. Your teeth, they exist. That's the best thing you can say about them. You might have a rag to rub them with, or a stick. Some people chew herbs or rinse with wine if they're feeling fancy. You don't. You just scrape what you can hope for the best and ignore the constant ache in your molars. If something hurts you, live with it. If something falls out, you thank it for its service and move on. Bathing happens occasionally. Maybe once a season. Maybe more if someone in the village builds up the nerve to heat a full tub of water. But in winter, forget it. Water freezes. Fires need wood. And no one wants to strip naked in a drafty hut while ice forms on the walls. Instead, you keep clean in other ways. You scrape. You rinse. You avoid strong smells when possible. You wear the same clothes over and over. Washing them means hauling water, heating it, scrubbing by hand, with ashes or lye, and hanging it in the weak sun. So you don't. Not unless you absolutely must. Your clothes itch. Everything itches. Your scalp, your arms, your legs itching is constant. Fleas are constant. You scratch in your sleep. You scratch at breakfast. It's considered polite to do so discreetly, but no one's judging. They're all itching too. You look around the room as others perform the same rituals, the same scraping, chewing, grimacing. A child with straw in their hair. A grandmother rubbing her hands together near the fire. Your father poking at his beard with a wooden comb, checking for lice. The dog gnawing at its own foot not to be left out. It's a strange, grim choreography. A dance of barely functioning survival. Everyone moving through it not because they want to, but because they must. Because there's work to be done. Because the animals need feeding. Because the fields still exist. Because winter does not care that your bread is hard and your water is freezing. You finish your pottage, wipe your mouth, take another swig of ale, stretch, regret it. Your day hasn't even begun. But you're already sore, already cold, already resigned to the fact that nothing is going to be easy. And yet, this is normal. This is life. This is how you start your day every day until the thaw comes. If it comes. Welcome to the morning medieval style. You've finished your meager breakfast and splashed your face with water that feels like it was imported directly from a glacier. Now it's time to dress, or more accurately, keep wearing what you never actually took off. Because in the Middle Ages, changing clothes daily is the stuff of royal fantasy. For you, a peasant getting dressed just means brushing the crumbs off your tunic and hoping it doesn't rip when you stretch. Let's talk about that tunic. It's made of wool, scratchy, stiff, and faintly damp no matter what you do. The color is somewhere between mud-stained gray and was that always brown, because dyes are a luxury. Most cloth is dyed once, maybe with plants or crushed bugs, and then it's left to fade under layers of sweat, smoke, and general hardship. Your tunic probably has patches, patches on patches. A few stitched by your mother, some sewn by your own clumsy hands. The thread never matches. Underneath, if you're lucky, you might have a linen shirt. A thin, barely holding itself together undergarment meant to soften the scratch of wool. If you're unlucky, it's just your skin and the tunic having a constant argument. And that's not a conversation you win. Trousers, they exist, sort of. Woven wool, again, possibly tied at the waist with a string or a bit of leather. There's no zipper, no buttons. Buttons are an extravagance, tiny, fiddly tokens of wealth that your world does not participate in. If your pants stay up all day, you consider it a victory. You wrap your legs in hose, think of them like early medieval leggings that have given up on being symmetrical. One might sag. The other might be knotted with twine to keep it from sliding down. Both are covered in the residue of every place you've ever walked, squatted, or slept. Footwear, maybe. Shoes are leather cracked, misshapen, stitched together more by hope than skill. No soles to speak of, no padding, no arch support. If you're wearing shoes at all, you're ahead of the game. A lot of folks just go barefoot. Through mud, through dung, through snow, and the cloak. You've got one cloak. Everyone does. It's the closest thing you have to armor against the wind, the rain, and the general unfairness of medieval weather. It's heavy. It's itchy. It probably smells like wet goat. But you wear it because the alternative is freezing. It's pinned at the shoulder with a wooden clasp or maybe just tied in a knot. It covers your whole body like a blanket that forgot how to be comforting. Now that you're fully dressed or at least wrapped in survival-grade textiles, let's turn to your shelter, your home, your sanctuary, your architectural insult. Your house is made from a technique known optimistically as wattle and daub. What this means in practice: branches woven together like a poorly made basket, then smeared generously with a mix of mud, straw, and animal dung. Yes, dung. It's sticky, it's free, and it does a decent job keeping the wind out. Mostly. Your walls are thick, but not thick enough. Every crack whistles in winter. Every breeze finds its way in like an uninvited ghost. You patch the holes with moss cloth scraps or more dung. You pretend it's insulation. It isn't. The roof is thatch layers of straw stacked high sometimes with bits of turf or weeds packed in for good measure. It looks rustic and charming until it starts leaking, or sagging, or nesting mice. A thatched roof can last a few years if you're lucky, or a few weeks if the weather's feeling spiteful. There's no ceiling, just the underside of the thatch dripping condensation or worse droppings. Sometimes a bird gets in, sometimes something else does. You don't ask questions when you hear scratching. There's no glass in your window. That would cost more than your house is worth. Instead, there's a hole maybe with a wooden shutter, maybe with a piece of stretched animal hide to keep out the worst of the wind. During the day, it lets in weak gray light. At night, it lets in the sound of owls howling wind and occasional panic. The door is wooden if you have one. Rough, uneven planks held together with pegs or rope. It doesn't quite close. There's always a gap, always a draft. You might hang an old blanket over it to slow the wind, but it's more symbolic than effective. When it storms, you pile hay against the threshold. When it snows, you shovel it out from under your bed. Speaking of beds, let's revisit your sleeping arrangement. It's not really a bed. It's a frame, maybe, if you're lucky, or just straw on the ground if you're not. The mattress is a stuffed sack filled with straw hay rushes or whatever was dry when you last foraged. It smells, it itches, it attracts bugs. You change the stuffing when it rots or when something dies in it. The floor dirt. That's it. Packed earth, hard and cold and unforgiving. Maybe you've scattered fresh straw across it for comfort. Maybe there are old rushes. They get trampled into mulch within days. You sweep them aside with a bundle of twigs and pretend you live like a lord. There's one room. Everything happens here: sleeping, cooking, eating, yelling at the pig. If you're lucky enough to have a second room, it's usually just for storage or hiding your better turnips from nosy neighbors. The hearth is the heart of the home, a shallow pit or stone circle where the fire lives. There's no chimney, just a hole in the roof that lets out smoke and sometimes lets in snow. The air inside is thick and gray. You breathe it constantly. Your eyes sting, your lungs wheeze, but without that fire you freeze. There's no furniture to speak of. A bench maybe, a stool, a small table if someone in your family knows how to carve. Everything else is crates, buckets, sacks, and whatever you can scavenge. You sit on the floor. You eat with your hands. You sleep wherever you can. In the corners you keep your tools. Your family's one prized kettle. A bit of twine. Maybe a spindle. Maybe a sickle. These are your possessions. These are your treasures. This house won't win awards. It won't keep you dry. It won't keep you warm. But it stands. It endures. And in the dead of winter, that's all that matters. You live in a home held together with mud straw and unspoken agreements with gravity. And somehow, it's enough. You've eaten. You've washed, technically. You've pulled your cloak tight, scratched the bite on your calf, and muttered something bitter toward the wind. Now it's time for what really defines a peasant's life work. Endless, punishing, soul-grinding labor. Not a job. Not a career. But survival in motion. Forget the idea of earning a living. You don't earn life out here. You claw it out of frozen dirt with your bare, cracked hands and hope the weather isn't in a foul mood. Today begins like most others. There are animals to feed. Not many. A couple of chickens, one temperamental pig, and maybe a goat if you haven't already traded it for grain. You check on them first, because losing livestock in the winter is like setting your pantry on fire. The animals live close, often in the same space as you or just behind a half-collapsed wooden partition that doesn't really separate smells, sounds, or warmth. You gather hay-break ice off the water trough and listen to your goat sneeze like it has something to prove. The pig watches you with the judgmental eyes of a creature who knows you might eat it by spring. You throw it a half-rotten turnip anyway. Then comes the firewood. It always comes back to firewood. There is never enough of it. It burns too fast. It's always wet. And hauling it takes more energy than it gives back in warmth. You trudge through frozen mud, past skeletal trees, dragging a bundle of kindling strapped with fraying rope. Your hands are numb. Your back screams. You keep going. Some days you chop wood, with a dull axe, on a stump that's more ice than tree. Splinters fly. Your arms shake. You wonder not for the first time how many more years your spine will agree to this arrangement. Then there's the field work. Yes, even in winter. The soil is too frozen to plow, but that doesn't mean there's no work. You still have to clear ditches, patch fences, check on grain stores, scare off crows, and hope no one steals your tools. You carry a basket full of nothing important just to look busy. In the feudal system, idleness isn't laziness, it's rebellion. You're a villain. Technically free, but really not. You owe labor to your lord several days a week, on his land, with his tools, for his benefit. Today might be one of those days, so you shuffle to the manorial fields. Larger, flatter, better soil, better drainage land you'll never own. Other peasants are already there, bent over picking frost-bitten stones out of furrows or hauling manure in carts with wheels that gave up months ago. You join them. You don't talk much. There's nothing new to say. Just grunts, muttered curses, and the rhythmic squeal of a poorly greased cart axle. Your lord never shows up. He doesn't need to. There's a steward, a reeve, a man with a stick and a sour expression. He watches everything. He counts everyone. You scratch your nose too long, he notices. You lean on your shovel, he raises an eyebrow. You leave early, someone's telling him. It's not that he enjoys the power. It's that he believes in it. Deeply. And the system rewards him for keeping the rest of you exactly where you are. Midday comes. No break, no lunchbox. Just a short pause while everyone chews on crusts of bread and pretends they aren't freezing. Someone offers a sliver of onion. It burns in your throat like fire and heaven. Then it's back to work. Maybe you're lucky and skilled in something. A carpenter, a thatcher, a cooper. You've got a trade. People need you. That's good. That's dangerous. Because if your work is useful, your neighbors might demand it. The Lord might notice it. The steward might underpay you. And you don't have the power to say no. You're always one nail away from being volunteered for something unpaid and painful. Let's say you're a thatcher today. You climb onto a neighbor's roof to replace sagging straw. It's slippery. The wind bites your fingers. The ladder is a tree branch and a prayer. You tie bundles of reed with frozen rope and mutter oaths with every gust of wind. If you fall, that's it. There's no doctor, no compensation. You lie in bed with cracked ribs while the cold seeps in. Maybe you heal. Maybe you don't. Work never waits. If you're a woman, your work is somehow even more endless. You tend animals, spin wool, mend clothes, patch that same roof, gather fuel, prepare food, raise children, and still find time to haul buckets of water from a well that hates you. You work from before dawn until your arms give out. You are not recognized. You are not thanked. You are necessary. Children work too. As soon as they can walk, they can carry. As soon as they can carry, they can fetch. By the age of 6, they're scaring birds from fields with clappers, dragging firewood, home feeding chickens, turning spits, gathering eggs. They don't go to school. There is no school. Their education is pain and repetition. There are no weekends. No days off. The only holiday is a church feast day, and even then you're expected to bring something to share. You attend Mass. You kneel on sore knees, and you thank God for giving you just enough not to die. You listen to the priest talk about humility, obedience, and the rewards of heaven. You nod. You pretend it helps. By late afternoon, the sun is already fading. The sky turns gray, then orange, then black. You trudge back to your hut, dragging your tools, your limbs, your silence. You're exhausted, but not the satisfying kind. It's the empty exhaustion of surviving another day without progress. You sit by the hearth, back aching, eyes dry, hands cracked and blackened with soot and soil. The fire flickers. It doesn't laugh. It wheezes just like you. And yet there is no other life. This is work. This is survival. This is how peasants lived, not for ambition or joy or progress, but simply to endure the next cold morning, with a little food in their gut and a roof leaky as it is over their heads. This is daily labor. Welcome to it. You're back home. The work is done, or at least as done as it ever gets. You sit by the fire, your joints crackling louder than the wood, and your mind drifts. Not toward comfort or plans or ambition, but toward fear. Not fear of wolves, not fear of hunger, not even fear of your Lord's steward and his favorite stick. No. This fear is older, deeper, the kind that grows in your bones when the fire flickers the wrong way, or the wind hisses through the cracks in your wall like it's saying your name. This is the fear of a world you cannot see, a world ruled by gods, saints, spirits, and shadows. Because in the Middle Ages, belief isn't something you choose. It's the structure of your reality. Your day began with a muttered prayer. It always does. You crossed yourself before getting out of bed, what passes for a bed, and you whispered thanks for not dying in your sleep. Because people do, all the time. You've seen it. Religion isn't Sunday only. It's every day, every hour, every decision. The church is everywhere. It owns land. It owns law. It owns fear. In your home, there might be a tiny wooden cross on the wall, a faded picture of the Virgin Mary. Maybe a splinter from the local saint's finger stored in a box and guarded like gold. You believe in miracles. You believe because not believing feels like gambling with eternity, and you can't afford to lose that bet. The village priest is the most educated man you know. He reads Latin. You don't. He preaches sermons. You listen even if you don't always understand. His words are thick, his warnings thicker. He tells you about hell, about sin, about the judgment of God. You nod along, clutching your rough-spun cloak tighter, not because you're cold, but because you might be damned. You were baptized before you knew what it meant. You'll confess your sins when you can remember them, or invent some just in case. You kneel in Mass, rise, kneel again. You say the prayers, not because they bring you peace, but because silence feels dangerous. You tithe when you can. You light candles for your dead, even though you suspect the priest recycles them. But beyond church and Mass and priests and saints, there's another world of belief that lives in the soil, in the woods, in the whispers of your grandmother. Superstition. You don't call it that. You call it sense. When your child has a fever, you don't just pray. You place iron scissors under their pillow to ward off fairies. When you spill salt, you toss it over your left shoulder to blind the devil. When the wind howls on the night of a new moon, you draw a cross in the ash by the hearth, just in case something's watching. You don't step on thresholds without blessing them. You don't look at owls too long. You don't walk into the woods at dusk, not because of wolves, but because of them. The old spirits, the ones from before the church came, the ones who haven't forgotten. There are charms for everything, for fertility, for luck, for a good harvest, for stopping your neighbor's cow from giving sour milk. Some are just knotted bits of thread. Others are teeth bones, herbs wrapped in linen and buried under doorsteps. You don't ask questions. You just do as you were taught. Women, especially older ones, carry knowledge. Healing herbs, warding prayers, recipes and remedies passed down without books. Some call them wise women. Others call them witches. But when your child is sick and the priest is too far, you knock on their door. But it's risky, because while everyone relies on them, everyone also fears them. All it takes is a bad crop, a sudden death, a cow that won't milk, and people start whispering. And whispering in a medieval village is as dangerous as a knife. The church doesn't love this old knowledge, but it tolerates some of it. So long as the woman in question keeps quiet, pays her dues, and crosses herself often. If not, well, You've seen firewood stacked high for less. You believe in saints, but you also believe in curses. You believe God watches everything, but so do your neighbors. And if they think you've brought misfortune to the village, whether through pride or magic or envy, they might not wait for a priest to intervene. You've heard stories. A woman's cow gave birth to a calf with 2 heads. She was dragged to the river, said it was a punishment from God. But the priest was away. So they weighed her down with stones, said if she was innocent, she'd float. She didn't float. Still, everyone felt safer afterward. That's how belief works here. It doesn't have to be true. It just has to keep the fear organized. And then there are relics, bits of bone, pieces of cloth, things that once touched saints or kings, or the Virgin herself. Pilgrims walk for months to touch them. You've never seen one yourself, but you've heard that they heal, that they weep, that they glow in the dark if your soul is clean. You doubt your soul is that clean. Still, you keep a little pouch under your tunic, a charm made of dried rosemary blessed by a cousin's cousin who knew a nun once. You never take it off, not even to bathe. Not that you bathe often. Night falls. Before bed, you murmur a prayer. You don't remember where you learned it. Something about angels guarding the door, saints watching the windows, and the devil staying far from your feet. You say it every night, just in case, because you know what the world is like when the fire dies, when the room goes silent, when the wind whispers your name through the thatch. In this world, belief isn't decoration. It's armor, it's law, it's the thing that keeps the unknown from knocking too loudly. You don't believe because it comforts you. You believe because not believing might kill you. The sun is gone now. You've finished the day's labor, paid your dues literally and figuratively, and dragged your aching body home. Your fingers are numb, your back is sore, and your mood sits somewhere between barely alive and might throw this wooden bowl at someone. It's time for supper, not dinner. That word doesn't belong here. Supper sounds humble because it is. This meal, if you can call it that, is your reward for not collapsing in the field or being arrested for stealing firewood. You gather near the hearth again, the same pit where you cooked breakfast, dried your boots, and once burned your foot. That time the embers popped. The fire is struggling, like everything else in this house. You add a stick, maybe a chunk of peat, if you're lucky, and stir the pot. Yes, it's the same pot, the same pottage. It never truly goes away, it just evolves. It's a sort of immortal stew, a thick grayish-brown slurry that clings to the spoon like it's trying not to be eaten. Today, it might have cabbage in it. Or maybe that's just a cabbage-shaped chunk of regret. You ladle it out first for the children, then for the elders, then for everyone else. No one gets full. Getting full is a rumor from the next village over. You get not starving, and that's considered generous. On feast days or when someone traps a rabbit, or your neighbor's chicken mysteriously dies and falls into your stew, there might be meat. On those nights, the pot smells like hope. People sit closer. Conversation actually happens. Eyes light up. Teeth come out. But tonight, there's no meat. Just a few soggy roots, some grain that's lost the will to be grain, and a sprig of herbs someone remembered to pick before the frost claimed the garden. The bread, once again, is hard enough to wound someone with. You dunk it in the stew to soften it. It works. Barely. You chew, you swallow. You don't ask questions about texture. To drink, you've got small ale again. Or if times are particularly bad, thin bitter water that may or may not contain actual frogs. You pray for ale, even bad ale. even the stuff that tastes like a wooden bucket, and regret. Because it's boiled, which means it won't poison you immediately. If you're really lucky, and that's a big if, there's a little wine. Not the stuff of lords aged in barrels and poured in chalices. No. This is tart, sour, sharp on the tongue. It tastes like fermented grape skins left in the sun too long. You sip it anyway, if only because it reminds you life still contains surprises. Once the bowls are scraped clean, sometimes literally with your fingers, it's time for the closest thing to entertainment. A medieval peasant gets other peasants. You talk. A little. About weather. About livestock. About someone's cousin who got kicked in the chest by a mule and now claims he can see angels in the chimney smoke. The children giggle. Someone groans. Someone farts. You all pretend not to hear it. If it's a good night, someone might have a story. A long, winding tale of a knight, a witch, a dragon, or a saint. None of it's true. All of it's better than your day. Sometimes someone sings. Not well, but loud enough to count. A folk song about lost love or lost pigs or both. The same verses repeated until everyone forgets they've heard it 100 times already. It's comforting, like scratching an old itch. The tavern exists, sure, but that's not for every night. And it's not for everyone. If you have coin or something to barter, you might slip down to the village alehouse. It's dark, it's loud, and the floor is sticky with things you don't want to identify. But it's warm, and that counts for a lot. Inside there's smoke, laughter, arguing, and the kind of stories that start with, "You didn't hear this from me." The ale is strong, or weak, or sour. You don't complain. Complaining gets you noticed, and getting noticed is how you end up in a ditch. Men gather here to pretend they aren't freezing and dying slowly. Women come too sometimes to serve drinks, sometimes to drink them. Sometimes just to watch and laugh at the men pretending they aren't terrified of them. There's dice if you're bold, and cards if someone has them. Gambling is officially frowned upon by the church, by your wife, by your better judgment. But you've got a chicken to wager and a dream of going home with 2 chickens. That's how empires are built. Sometimes there's a fiddler half-drunk, teeth missing bow frayed. He plays anyway. The music creaks and wobbles like an old boat, but it lifts the room. People clap, people dance. Not well, not gracefully, but with force. And that's all that matters. And if there's a festival, a festival is something else entirely. These don't happen often. Maybe once a season, maybe only after harvest. But when they come, the whole village explodes into noise and chaos and questionable decisions. There's music, dancing, masks, mead sausages with actual meat in them, games involving sticks, hoops, and a dangerous amount of spinning. People wear garlands. People sing until they collapse. People kiss strangers behind haystacks. The church watches carefully. Too much joy is suspicious. But even the priest has a cup in hand and a slightly glazed look in his eyes. No one questions it. Life is hard. You take your joy where you can. And tonight, that joy is wrapped in candlelight and spilled ale and songs you don't remember the words to. But not every night is a festival. Most nights you sit by the fire, gut half full, eyes half open, listening to your neighbor's toothless uncle explain why ducks are cursed or why the moon makes dogs smarter. And somehow that's enough. Because in this world, entertainment isn't Netflix or novels. It's warmth. It's food. It's the voice of someone who's still breathing. It's laughter over nothing. It's bread that didn't kill you. It's ale that didn't make you blind. And it's knowing for just one more night you're not alone in the dark. Night has fallen completely. The fire is dying down. The air is thick with smoke and snores. Someone's still coughing. They've been coughing for weeks now, deep, wet, chest-rattling coughs that shake the straw mattress and occasionally wake the baby. You try not to think about it, but you do, because in the Middle Ages, the only thing more reliable than winter is death. You don't live with the fear of illness. You live in it. It's not a threat, it's a roommate. Someone always has a fever. Someone always has boils. Someone's always limping or vomiting or lying down and refusing to get back up. Illness isn't a disruption to daily life. It's woven into it like the smoke in your walls or the itch of your wool. You start coughing. That's just Tuesday. You can't move your arm anymore. Try using the other one. You faint in the field. Hopefully someone drags you back before the pigs get curious. The causes nobody knows. Bad air, angry saints, maybe a witch, maybe your sins, probably all of them. Germ theory won't show up for several hundred years, and until then, every fever is a mystery and a warning. The local doctor, if there is one, is either a barber, a monk, or a woman with a pouch full of herbs and a suspicious amount of confidence. You don't call her a doctor, of course. You call her wise or gifted, or behind closed doors maybe dangerous. Her medicine smells like boiled weeds and tastes like old socks. She makes you drink things that bubble. She makes you sit in smoke. She rubs ointments on your chest that make your skin burn and your eyes water. But sometimes you stop coughing, or at least you cough less. There's always bloodletting, of course. That's a favorite. The idea is simple. You're sick because your humors are out of balance. You've got too much blood. So the solution, take some out. You lie on a bench. A man with a dull blade opens your arm. The blood runs out. You try not to scream. If you faint, it's considered proof the treatment is working. If you die, well, at least you died balanced. There are leeches, too. They get placed on your skin like slow, slimy doctors. They suck until they fall off bloated and satisfied. People swear by them. You try not to think about it. For wounds, there are poultices, mushy plant paste packed into cloth and slapped on your body. They help, or they rot. Hard to say. For stomach aches, there's ale with spices. For headaches, prayer. For plague, well, there's nothing for plague. When the Black Death rolled through not too long ago, it didn't knock. It kicked the door in and emptied entire villages. Buboes in the armpits, blackened toes, bleeding gums, and death within days. People wore herbs in masks. They burned sweet-smelling wood. They whipped themselves in the streets. They begged for mercy from above and forgiveness from below. But none of it worked. The plague didn't care. And yet somehow you survived. Maybe you're one of the lucky ones. Maybe your blood is weird. Or maybe, as some say, the devil's already claimed you and has no use for you just yet. Injuries are their own adventure. You burn yourself. You live with it. You cut your hand. You pray it doesn't fester. Because infection is a silent killer. A red line up your arm could be a death sentence. A swelling on your leg could mean amputation, and no one wants that. Not because they fear surgery, but because surgery is just a man with a saw and a bottle of something strong enough to knock you out or make you forget what happened. Anesthesia doesn't exist. You bite on wood. You scream into a rag. And you hope the knife is sharp enough to be quick. Childbirth. That's not a miracle. That's Russian roulette with screaming. Every birth is a gamble. The mother might survive. She might not. The baby might breathe. It might not. There are no guarantees. There are only midwives, boiling water, whispered prayers, and a lot of blood. When someone dies, you know it quickly. There's no morgue, no time. The body gets wrapped, blessed, and buried fast before it starts to stink. The village bell tolls. People gather. There's no time for elaborate grief. Death is familiar. It happens all the time. A child you saw yesterday might be gone tomorrow. Your neighbor might not wake up. Your father might walk into the woods and not return. Illness doesn't announce itself. It simply arrives, sets the table, and waits for you to sit down. But there's also ritual. Always ritual. You cross yourself when you sneeze. You say prayers when someone coughs. You mark the door with chalk during plague season. You burn herbs on certain nights. You drink from the healing spring 3 villages over, even though it mostly tastes like disappointment. Hope, like illness, is persistent. Sometimes someone recovers. A wound closes. A fever breaks. A mother and child survive the birth. And everyone celebrates not with wine or song, but with a silent, grateful exhale. Because the universe blinked and you slipped through. And then you go on. Because what else is there? You live with the fear. You feed it scraps of superstition and ritual and dried herbs. You pretend it's not there. You joke about it. You point to the coughing uncle in the corner and say, "He's too stubborn to die." And maybe he is. But deep down, you know the truth. Death doesn't knock in this world. It walks in, and sometimes it stays the night. It's late now. The fire is low, its last embers barely alive. The hut is quiet, save for a few snores, a distant cough, and the gentle shifting of straw as someone turns in their sleep. You lie there, eyes open in the dark, surrounded by the breathing bodies of your family. The walls are thin, but the weight of those lives is heavy. Let's talk about that weight. In the Middle Ages, family isn't a concept, it's a sentence. You don't choose your household. You don't curate it. You're born into it, tied to it like a knot in a net. You survive together. Or you don't. Let's start with women. Being a woman in your world isn't an identity. It's a role, a job, a demand. You work constantly. You wake up before the men, tend to the fire, feed the animals, prepare the food, mend the clothes, haul the water patch, the roof, scold the children, and then do it all again tomorrow. You are the first to rise and the last to sleep. You are not weak. You can't afford to be. Your body is a tool and a battleground. You're expected to bear children, many, because most won't live. You're told it's your purpose. You're told it's holy. No one talks about how terrifying it is, how often you bleed, how often you scream, how often you don't make it. When you're pregnant, you pray. When the baby comes, you pray harder. You might be in the field bent over when the pain begins. There's no hospital, no doctor. Just a midwife, a rag to bite down on, and God's mercy. Sometimes it's enough. Sometimes it isn't. But childbirth is just one of your trials. You are not just a mother. You are a farmer, a brewer, a baker, a weaver, a healer, and sometimes quietly a leader. You are expected to be obedient, modest, pious, and always tired. If you laugh too loudly, if you speak too freely, if you stand too tall, people notice. And that's dangerous. Your worth is measured in dowries, in births, in how well you carry burdens without complaint. You might marry at 13. You might bury your first child at 14. And through it all, you are expected to smile politely when the priest talks about God's divine plan. But even in this world, you find strength. You whisper to your daughters at night. You teach them things the men don't know. You share stories, secrets, herbs. You pass down knowledge like a flame hidden in cloth. You find ways to laugh, to fight, to survive. Now the children. They don't get to be children for long. By the time they can walk, they can work. By the time they can speak, they're taught to obey. Toys are sticks, stones, a doll made from rags. Play is short and often interrupted by chores. Childhood is brief and often brutal. Infant mortality is a constant. Families have many children, knowing many won't survive. Illness, hunger, accident, they come without warning. You bury one child, then hold the next tighter. But you never stop working. Grief doesn't excuse you from the chores. Boys are expected to follow their fathers, girls their mothers. They learn the trade of the household, farming, weaving, fishing, baking. If they're lucky, a priest might teach them a few Latin words. If they're luckier, they'll live past 10. Children see everything. The toil, the fear, the love, the loss. They grow up fast. They speak like adults before their voices change. They marry young. They have children while still children themselves. The cycle repeats. And yet somehow there's joy. A child chasing a chicken through the mud. A girl braiding her sister's hair with wildflowers. A boy laughing so hard he falls over, even though the family hasn't eaten meat in a week. Joy doesn't need comfort. It finds cracks in even the hardest lives. Then there's the family unit itself. Your home may be small, but it's full. Parents, grandparents, siblings, cousins. Sometimes strangers, sometimes orphans. No one lives alone. There's no room for it. Privacy is non-existent. Secrets are shouted through straw walls. But there's also love, though not always gentle. A mother snapping at her son for tracking in mud is also the woman who'll give him the last spoonful of pottage. A father grumbling about his daughter's loud singing is also the one who walked 3 miles to fetch her herbs when she was feverish. You share everything. The food, the chores, the pain. You sleep side by side. You know every cough, every sigh, every nighttime rustle. You know when someone's mood changes just from the way they step across the floor. You also argue, loudly, frequently. A single hut. 12 people, 1 fire, and a sick goat in the corner. This is not a recipe for harmony. Voices rise. Tempers flare. Doors slam if you had any. But the next day you still pass the bread. You still mend their tunic. You still stay. Marriage is not always love. Sometimes it's survival. A transaction. A merging of land or debts or expectations. But over time it becomes something else. Familiarity. Dependence. A shared story too tangled to separate. You don't write family trees. You live inside them. And at the heart of it all is a kind of loyalty that's messy, rough, and utterly unbreakable. You might curse your brother for borrowing your cloak. But if someone else insults him, you'll fight them. With words, fists, or firewood. Family in this world is not optional. It's everything. The sun is slanting low now, casting long shadows across the frost-hardened ground. The weak golden light gives the illusion of warmth, but you know better. It's colder now than it was this morning. Always is. The wind picks up in the afternoon as if it knows you're tired and chooses that moment to become cruel again. You're back outside because the work isn't done. It never is. In winter, daylight is short. Every moment counts. You're chopping wood again, or gathering kindling, or hauling a bucket of slop to the pig pen because the pig, unlike you, is expected to fatten up. Your hands are stiff, your feet ache, and your breath is visible. But physical labor isn't the only burden out here. There's another kind of weight pressing on your chest, social pressure. The complicated, unwritten, ever-changing web of status, resentment, fear, and punishment that makes up the day-to-day reality of medieval village life. You live in a world of unspoken rules. Break them and you suffer. Not through prison bars or police sirens, but through whispers, exclusion, punishment in the stocks, or worse. Let's say your neighbor claims your chickens wandered onto his field again. You say they didn't. He says they did. You argue. You raise your voice. And just like that, you're that person, the one with unruly chickens, the one who causes problems. Everyone notices. Everyone listens. The gossip mill in a medieval village never sleeps. It spins faster than your spinning wheel. It knows when you're late to mass, when you muttered under your breath, when your daughter went walking alone after dark. It doesn't forget. And it doesn't forgive easily. If a conflict goes unresolved, it festers. Maybe your neighbor poisons your well. Maybe your son throws a rock at his fence. Maybe someone's ox dies mysteriously. No one says anything aloud, but everyone sees the tension. They nod. They remember. They choose sides. Disputes over land, livestock, or inheritance can last generations. Families can be enemies for so long they forget what started it. The feud becomes a tradition, a bloodless war fought with glances and backhanded compliments. You try to stay out of it, but you can't. Even walking through the village is an act of diplomacy. Who do you greet first? Who do you avoid? Who do you let borrow your sickle? Who do you pretend you didn't hear? There's a constant fear of offending someone with more power. Maybe a merchant. Maybe the reeve the peasant appointed to enforce the Lord's will. He's not nobility, but he speaks with the Lord's authority. He can fine you. He can summon you to court. He can ruin you with a word. Sometimes he does. If you're summoned, you appear before the manorial court. It's held in a hall or under a tree or wherever the Lord's steward decides. It's not about justice. It's about control. You're not judged by peers. You're judged by hierarchy. Stole firewood. Pay a fine. Failed to maintain your hedgerow. Pay a fine. Let your pig wander. Pay a fine and pray it didn't root in someone else's field. Fines pile up like debt, and debt is a dangerous thing. If you owe too much, you can lose your land or worse, your freedom. There's no bankruptcy in your world. Just disgrace, exile, or indentured servitude. And what of actual crime theft? Violence. Adultery, the punishments are public, theatrical, humiliating. Thieves might be placed in stocks, wooden frames that clamp around the neck and wrists. They sit there for hours, sometimes days, exposed to the weather and the ridicule of their neighbors. Children throw things, adults spit. Everyone watches, that's the point. The punishment isn't just for the crime, it's a warning. Sometimes for more serious offenses, there's flogging. The reeve wields the whip. Blood is drawn, pride is broken. No one forgets the sound. You don't sleep well that night or any night after. In rare cases, someone is branded. A mark on the face or hand. Permanent shame. Everyone will know forever. And in the darkest cases, there's execution. Hanging, drowning, burning. But those are rare. Not because the law is merciful, but because the system is more efficient when people are afraid without being dead. Violence between villagers happens too. Fistfights in taverns, stabbings in alleyways, axes drawn in rage over land or love or insult. You don't call the authorities. You hope no one notices. Or you handle it within the community through quiet revenge or forced apologies, or if things get really bad, exile. And then there are the lords. Your village doesn't run itself. There's a man or several men who own the land you live on. You are a tenant, a serf, a name in a ledger. You owe him work. You owe him food. You owe him deference. If he rides through the village, you stop what you're doing. You bow. You remove your hat. You pretend you don't resent him, because resentment gets you nowhere. He has guards. You have a hoe. Even within your class, there are layers. Freemen, villains, cotters, bordars. Some own a little land. Some own none. Some rent. Some borrow. Everyone knows who's above who, even if no one writes it down. The poorest of the poor might beg, might steal, might starve. You avoid them, not because you hate them, but because they remind you of what you could become. Social mobility. It doesn't exist. You are who you are, forever. And if you break that mold, if you rise too fast, people notice, and they don't like it. Which means every decision you make is filtered through the question, will this make my life harder? So you keep your voice down. You give what you can. You let your neighbor borrow the shovel even though he never returns it. You attend every feast, every funeral, every wedding, even if you're not invited, especially if you're not invited. Because being seen is survival, and because in this world justice isn't blind. It's watching you, always. The sky is dark now, properly completely dark. Not the soft twilight of an autumn evening. This is medieval night, real, raw darkness. The kind that swallows light whole and settles heavy on your chest. Inside your home, the fire has shrunk to a small, sullen glow. The few candles you have, tallow homemade and barely more than lumps of greasy wax, are too precious to burn without purpose. So you sit in semi-darkness. You know every creak of the wood, every sigh from the straw, every shiver down your spine. Night in the Middle Ages isn't romantic. It's dangerous. You listen, not to music, not to voices, to the wind and what might be in it, to the rustling near the door, to the hoot of an owl that sounds too close, to the silence between the sounds. Because in the dark, everything feels alive. You huddle under your blanket if you have one, sharing it with whoever is closest. Husband, wife, children, grandmother, possibly a chicken. Body heat is more important than boundaries. You sleep close because the air is cruel. But before sleep, there's fear. You fear the fire going out. Without it, there's no warmth, no light. Just cold and black, and breath you can see until you can't anymore. You bank the coals, bury them in ash, whisper a hope and hope they're still glowing when you wake. You fear the thatch catching fire. One ember, one spark, and your home is a torch. It happens. Everyone knows someone who lost everything in minutes. Fire spreads fast when your walls are sticks and your roof is straw. You fear wolves. They're not mythical. They're real. They come in winter hungry and brave. They circle villages. They snatch sheep-goats, even children. You've heard stories. You've seen bones. You fear thieves, or worse, people who used to be neighbors, now desperate enough to take what isn't theirs. Desperate enough to kill. You bar the door wedge, a stool beneath the handle. It won't stop much, but it makes you feel better. You fear spirits, ghosts, the devil himself. He walks in stories, yes, but also in fields and forests. You've heard the old tales of glowing eyes, whispering winds, black dogs that vanish before dawn. You try not to think about them. But you do. You fear illness. Still, always. Someone coughs in the night. You count how many times. You wonder if it's worse. You wonder if it's you next. You fear silence, but you also fear sound. A knock at the door after midnight. The bleating of a sheep that shouldn't be out. A dog barking once, then going quiet. The wind howling your name or something that sounds like it. You say your prayers, the same ones every night. Words muttered half asleep, half in terror. God keep the fire. God keep the baby. God keep the sickness away. You cross yourself. You do it again. Your body is tired. It wants sleep. But your mind has other plans. Because sleep is not peace. Not always. There are dreams, wild, vivid, terrifying. Some say they come from spirits. Others say from bad bread or mushrooms or sin. You don't care. You just want them to stop. You turn over on the straw bed. Someone stirs beside you. The child murmurs. The old man groans. The dog shifts. The fire crackles, then sighs. Eventually, you drift off. But even in sleep, you're not safe. You've heard the stories of people who never woke, of women smothered by smoke, of children taken by the cold, of entire families who went to bed and were found frozen, curled together like firewood. The night is not your friend. It is something to be endured, to be passed through. If you must wake, you do so carefully. You light no candle. You feel your way with hands, not eyes. You don't call out. You don't open the door. You do your business in a corner behind a curtain, if you have one, and you crawl back under the covers, teeth chattering. You dream of warmth, of silence that doesn't threaten, of beds with actual mattresses, of sleep that heals instead of haunts. But mostly, you just hope to wake up, because not everyone does. And when morning comes, and it will come however gray, however cold, you'll roll over, breathe in the smoke and sweat and damp and say to yourself, I'm still here. And that in this world is the closest thing to a blessing. The embers have gone cold now. Outside, the wind slips through the trees, brushing against rooftops, stirring the snow in lazy, whispering spirals. Inside, the village sleeps or pretends to. You've been through another day in the life of a medieval peasant. And now here in the dark, we breathe out together. Let's take a moment. You've woken up in a bed that wasn't soft, eaten food that barely passed for a meal, dressed in wool that scratched, walked on floors that froze your feet, and spent your hours working the same fields your ancestors died in. You've been hungry, tired, cold. You've sat through sermons and rumors, patched the same roof for the 4th time, and hoped the fire doesn't die tonight. You've seen the weight women carry, the pressure, the danger, the pain of childbirth, the never-ending labor, the strength it takes just to keep going. You've seen children working before they can read, boys growing up too fast, girls married off too young, illness stealing breaths in the night, fever arriving without warning, teeth aching, backs breaking, the priest nodding gravely while holding out his hand for tithe. You've seen fear wrapped in prayer, beliefs that hold the village together, superstitions that seep through cracks in the doorframe, the fear of wolves, of sickness, of sin, of not being noticed, of being noticed too much. You've seen how it all holds together, just barely, held with mud and straw, hope and habit. And yet somehow it endures. This life you've walked through tonight isn't glamorous. It isn't soft. but it was real. For hundreds of years, for millions of people, this was life, and they lived it fully. They laughed despite it, told stories by firelight, drank bad ale and sang worse songs, fell in love, fell apart, argued over chickens, danced during feast days, birthed, buried, carried on. Because carrying on was the only option. You may never know their names, but your world is built on their bones, their labor, their scars, their breath in the cold morning air. You have blankets now. You have warmth. You can drink clean water without boiling it 3 times. You can press a button to make light appear. You can sleep alone or in silence or in peace. So tonight, as you pull your blanket higher, let this story settle over you like a second layer. Let your thoughts drift. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let the flickering fire of history lull you to rest. Because tonight, you don't have to fight the wind. You don't have to fear the cough. You don't have to patch your roof with dung or pray the ale didn't go sour. You just have to breathe. In and out. You are warm. You are safe. You are far, far away from that cold hut, that endless field, that aching hunger. And if your bed creaks or your room is quiet, listen closely. You might still hear them. The low murmur of a story told in a smoky corner. The shuffle of straw beneath tired limbs. The wind scratching at the thatch. But it can't reach you anymore. Not tonight. Not here. So close your eyes. Exhale the last of the cold. Let the past return to the shadows. And remember, you don't have to wake up in the Middle Ages. Sleep well.